imagine you guys all heard stories about the Boogie-Man, right? You know, the ghost-like creature that's said to hide under the bed or in the closet. The monster that kids fear, yet is dismissed as a legend when we grow older. Yeah. Well, I'm sorry. I'm afraid this story involves that figure, which means you might laugh at it, but please, hear me out. You see, this story was passed down from me, from my uncle, and it concerns a family who lived next to us. Or so he claimed, anyway. The family moved away shortly after the events, which I always believed was a sign that my uncle was lying. Yet, even to this day, the story creeps me out a little. And I've asked my parents if it's true, and they've never said yes or no. But often, they look rather uncomfortable before changing the subject or telling me to stop being silly. Anyway, here's the story as my uncle tells it. Kevin was an 8-year-old boy who lived at home with his mom and dad, who knew all too well the active imagination their son had. Ever since he was 3, he'd come running into their room at night complaining about the Boogie-Man, and as the years went by, both his mom and dad began to grow weary of this behavior. Eventually, seeing no other option, his mom and dad decided to go to bed one night with a promise not to give in to Kevin's imagination. Sure enough, later that night, Kevin ran into the room and called out, "Mom! Dad! The Boogeyman! The Boogeyman's in my room!" "Go to bed, Kevin," Mom replied. "But Mom, the Boogeyman is there!" Kevin protested. "Go to bed," his father replied. Both parents felt a little bad as the young son stood there, clearly not wishing to return to his room. Yet eventually, he departed and closed the door right behind himself. "Are you sure we're doing the right thing?" Kevin's mom asked her husband. "He'll be all right. He needs to get over this," Kevin's dad replied. "He seems frightened. I should go check," Kevin's mom replied, only for her husband to hold her back. "We have to do this, for Kevin's sake," Kevin's dad had said. Despite her reluctance, eventually Kevin's mom closed her eyes and went back to sleep. In the morning, Kevin's mother was the first to wake up and went to her son's room, still feeling guilty over the previous night, but expecting to find her son huddled up under the blankets as she slowly opened the door. What followed was a horrible scream that woke Kevin's father with a start, and he rushed out of bed and into Kevin's room, where he soon fell to his knees beside his wife as they gazed at a terrible sight. Kevin had been hung by the curtains, the windows open wide as dirty boot prints stained the floor. A paper note attached to Kevin's chest read, "Do you believe in monsters?" I have trouble sleeping at night. In fact, I rarely sleep at night. I spend most of my nights on the computer, reading this and that on the internet. Creepy stories, philosophy, and even psychology-related documents. They really interest me. I stay awake all night reading or talking to friends on Facebook while drinking cups of tea. I like my tea. I gather my lost sleep during the day. Like at school, I find that English is the easiest, or music class. Last night, I read this one particular story which made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. It was titled, "The Boogeyman." I thought it sounded cliché, but my curiosity bested me once more, so I decided to read it. There wasn't much else to do at 3:30 in the morning. The story was actually pretty long. It took me about an hour to get through it. but I'm glad I read it. It was really well written. According to this, the boogeyman comes when everyone but his victims is in a deep sleep. He walks around your house and gently taps on the window, trying to find which window is the one into your bedroom. He starts to tap more violently and louder as he gets closer to you. The victim in the story I read was at her computer in her bedroom just surfing the internet, and she started to hear this tapping sound. She turns her head, looking around her room cautiously, but the tapping stops. She continues what she was doing, and the tapping starts up again, this time a lot louder. A little paranoid, the victim stands up and walks over to her bedroom door to make sure that it's locked. She then walks towards her bedroom window to make sure that nothing can see or get inside. Just as she was about to sit down in her chair by her computer, the tapping returns. This time, though, it sounds like it's coming from within her room. Starting to freak out, she starts to search for her room for the source of the noise. She checks in her closet, in the drawers of her desk, under the doona on her bed, and under the bed itself. As she lies on the floor, she sees two bright green eyes staring back at her. She screams and jumps up, hitting her head on something hard, and she falls to the ground. She struggles to roll over, and she sees a giant, furry creature, too tall for her room. It started to breathe heavily and leaned over her, studying her. It moves its hands and reaches down for her throat. It grips her by the throat and pulls her up, choking her. She claws on the giant hand around that is cutting off her airways and kicks and beats at the monster. To no avail. Her face changes colors from red to blue to green and then to brown, the color of the monster. As its grip tightens around her fragile neck, she goes limp. She stops flailing her arms and legs, and the monster lets the limp body fall to the floor. With a flash of bright light, the boogeyman instantly vanished. I turn off my computer as my eyes are starting to fail me, and they're failing to stay open. Just as I'm about to crawl into bed, I hear a tapping.